The office of The Daily Show buzzed with the usual Monday morning energy. Staff writers huddled around a table covered in coffee cups, producers stared at their screens checking the week's lineup, and interns darted between desks delivering messages. Nothing about this particular morning suggested anything extraordinary was about to happen. Tom Wilson, who had been producing for The Daily Show for nearly 8 years, was scanning through his emails when one particular message caught his attention. The subject line simply read, "Keanu Reeves, appearance request." Tom blinked twice, making sure he wasn't misreading. Celebrities and their teams reached out all the time, but typically through well-established channels and usually when they had something specific to promote. Tom clicked on the email. It was from Keanu's personal assistant, not his publicity team or talent agency. The message was surprisingly straightforward. Keanu Reeves would like to appear on The Daily Show within the next 2 weeks, if possible. No mention of a new movie. No book to promote, no charity event to highlight. Just a request to come on the show. "Hey, Lisa," Tom called across the room to the head booker. "Did you know anything about Keanu Reeves wanting to come on the show?" Lisa looked up from her computer, eyebrows raised. "Keanu? No. He's notoriously private. We've tried booking him at least 4 times in the past 3 years. Always a polite no thank you from his team." Tom swiveled his chair toward her. "Well, looks like he's reaching out to us this time." Word spread quickly through the office. Trevor Noah, who was in the middle of a pre-show meeting, was immediately intrigued when his assistant interrupted to share the news. "Keanu wants to come on the show?" "That's unexpected," Trevor said, leaning back in his chair. "What's he promoting?" "That's the strange part," his assistant replied. "Nothing, apparently. The email just says he'd like to have a conversation with you." Trevor's curiosity was piqued. Like many in Hollywood, he had heard countless stories about Keanu's kindness and humility, but the actor rarely did talk shows unless required for promotional purposes. A request like this was unusual, to say the least. "Let's make it happen," Trevor decided. "Find out when he's available and we'll work around his schedule." By mid-afternoon, arrangements were being made for Keanu to appear on Thursday's show, just 3 days away. The timing meant shuffling some other guests around, but everyone agreed it was worth it. Keanu Reeves was not only an A-list star, but also someone known for being genuinely interesting when he chose to speak. Rachel Chen, the show's head writer, stopped by Tom's desk later that day. "So what angle are we taking with Keanu? Should we focus on the John Wick universe or maybe the rumors about another Matrix sequel?" Tom shook his head. His team didn't specify any talking points. They just said Keanu wants to have an authentic conversation with Trevor. Rachel looked skeptical. "That's it? No pre-approved questions? No topics to avoid?" "Nope. Just an authentic conversation. Whatever that means." The next day, Tuesday, the team expected to receive the usual list of guidelines from Keanu's representatives, the standard practice for any celebrity appearance. Most publicists would send over a detailed email outlining what their client was willing to discuss, what was off limits, and specific talking points they wanted to hit during the interview. Instead, they received a brief message asking if Trevor would be open to discussing some topics that weren't typical for celebrity interviews: philosophical concepts, global humanitarian issues, and recent scientific breakthroughs. The email emphasized that Keanu didn't want to seem pretentious, but hoped for a conversation with more substance than the usual talk show banter. Trevor read the email twice before responding personally. "Tell Keanu I'd be more than happy to go. Wherever the conversation takes us. No preparation needed on his part." By Wednesday afternoon, the day before the scheduled appearance, the production team was buzzing with theories. Why was Keanu doing this now? Was he planning to announce retirement? A major life change? A secret project years in the making? Maybe. "He's becoming a monk," joked one of the writers during their afternoon meeting. "He's got that vibe." Or maybe he's finally going to explain why he never seems to age, another chimed in. Trevor, listening to the speculation with amusement, held up his hand. Whatever his reasons, let's just be ready for anything, and let's give him the space to say what he wants to say. Later that evening, in a boutique hotel not far from the studio, Keanu sat at a small desk in his room. Unlike many celebrities who traveled with an entourage, he preferred to keep things simple. The desk was covered with handwritten notes, not talking points prepared by publicists, but his own thoughts jotted down over several weeks. Keanu wasn't typically nervous before appearances, but this was different. He wasn't here to promote anything. For once, he wanted to speak freely as himself. At 59, he had spent decades keeping a careful distance between his public persona and his private thoughts. Few people knew the real person behind the characters he played. He looked down at one particular note he had written: "Purpose beyond fame." That was at the heart of what he wanted to discuss. After decades in the spotlight, he had come to some realizations that felt important to share. Not as a celebrity with all the answers, but as a human being still figuring things out. Keanu's phone buzzed with a text from his assistant. "Everything's set for tomorrow. Trevor seems genuinely excited to talk with you." He texted back a simple, "Thank you," then returned to his notes. He wasn't planning to memorize anything that would defeat the purpose of an authentic conversation. These were just reminders to himself about the ideas he wanted to explore. Meanwhile, at the Daily Show office, the day was winding down. Most of the staff had gone home, but Tom remained, finalizing the schedule for tomorrow's taping. The Keanu segment was slotted for 30 minutes, the longest interview they'd planned in weeks. As Tom was about to leave, his phone rang. It was Lisa, the head booker. "You're not going to believe this," she said, her voice a mix of amusement and disbelief. "Keanu's assistant just called. He wanted to know if Trevor would be comfortable if Keanu brought up some deeply personal topics during their conversation." "Did she give any hints about what those topics might be?" Tom asked. "No. Just said that Keanu has been thinking a lot about his journey and some experiences that have shaped his worldview. She emphasized that he doesn't want this to feel like a typical promotional appearance." Tom laughed softly. "Well, it certainly won't be that. I'll let Trevor know, but I'm pretty sure he'll be fine with it. This is shaping up to be one of our most interesting shows in a while." After hanging up, Tom sent a quick message to Trevor updating him on the latest development. Trevor's response came almost immediately. "Perfect. The less predictable, the better." By the time Tom finally left the office, a strange excitement had settled over him. In an industry where most celebrity appearances were carefully scripted and managed down to the minute, this felt refreshingly unpredictable. Tomorrow, for once, nobody, not the producers, not the audience, not even Trevor himself, knew exactly what to expect. As the lights dimmed in the Daily Show office, across town, Keanu Reeves placed his notes in a simple folder and prepared for bed. Tomorrow would be different from the hundreds of interviews he'd done throughout his career. Tomorrow, he would finally share something real. Thursday morning arrived with a buzz of anticipation at the Daily Show studio. The usual pre-show routine took on a different energy as staff members kept glancing at the clock, knowing that in just a few hours, Keanu Reeves would walk through their doors. In the writer's room, the team gathered for their final meeting before the show. Papers were scattered across the table, coffee cups forming a small army along the edge. "All right, let's go through the Keanu segment one more time," said Rachel, tapping her pen against her notepad. "We've got 30 minutes slotted, but Trevor wants flexibility to extend if the conversation calls for it." Tom nodded, scrolling through his tablet. "I've just received another message from Keanu's assistant. She sent over some topics he's comfortable discussing." He looked up, his expression puzzled. "It's not what I expected." He turned his tablet around to show the others. The list included topics like the impact of technology on human connection, grief as a transformative experience, and ethical responsibilities of wealth and influence. One of the newer writers, David, raised his eyebrows. "Are we sure this is for a comedy talk show and not a TED Talk?" Rachel studied the list. "This is definitely unusual. Most celebrities come with talking points about their latest project, maybe a funny anecdote from set. This is," she searched for the right word, "deeper." Trevor's going to love this, Tom said. He's always wanted to have more substantial conversations on the show. Meanwhile, at the hotel, Keanu was having breakfast in his room while reviewing his thoughts one final time. Unlike his usual routine before press appearances, he hadn't rehearsed any answers or prepared witty stories. This time he wanted the conversation to flow naturally. His phone rang. It was his longtime friend and occasional assistant, Kelly. "Morning, Keanu. Just checking in. How are you feeling about today?" Keanu took a sip of his tea before answering. "Good. Calm. A little nervous, but in a good way." "Nervous? That's new. I've seen you jump off buildings for stunts without batting an eye." He smiled at that. "This is different. Acting it's putting on someone else's skin. Today, I'm just me." "Well, just you is pretty great," Kelly said. "The car will be there at 3 p.m. The show wants you there early for sound check and makeup, even though we both know you'll probably just run a hand through your hair and call it done." Keanu laughed softly. Some habits die hard. After hanging up, he walked to the window and looked out at the city below. For decades, he had maintained a careful distance between his public and private life. Few people knew about his personal struggles, his philosophical interests, or the quiet charity work he'd been doing for years. He had always believed that his work should speak for itself, and that celebrities shouldn't use their platform to preach to others. But lately, he had been questioning that approach. At nearly 60 years old, he had experienced enough of life, its joys and its profound sorrows, to have learned some lessons worth sharing. Not as someone with all the answers, but as a fellow traveler on the same complicated human journey. Back at the studio, Trevor Noah had arrived and was being briefed on the day's schedule. "So Keanu is our main guest," his producer explained. "We've kept the rest of the show light since we're expecting his segment to be the highlight." Trevor nodded, reading through the unusual list of topics Keanu had sent over. "This is fascinating. He's not promoting anything at all?" "Nothing. No new projects announced, no book, no charity event, just a conversation?" Trevor leaned back in his chair, intrigued. "In 15 years of interviewing people, I've never had a major celebrity request to come on just to talk. There's always an agenda, a movie to promote, a controversy to address, something." His producer shrugged. "Well, it's Keanu. He's always been different." As the hours ticked by, the studio audience began to arrive, unaware that today's show would be anything out of the ordinary. The warm-up comedian got them laughing and energized, occasionally hinting that they were in for a special treat. Backstage, the production team was making final preparations when a staff member rushed in. Keanu's car just pulled up. Unlike many celebrities who arrived with an entourage, Keanu walked in with just one person, Kelly, who carried a small bag and a folder of papers. He was dressed simply in a well-worn black suit, his hair slightly longer than in his most recent films. The show's hospitality coordinator greeted them warmly. "Mr. Reeves, welcome to The Daily Show. We're so excited to have you here." "Thank you for having me," Keanu replied with a genuine smile, "and please, call me Keanu." As he was shown to his dressing room, several staff members tried, and failed, to act casual as he passed by. Despite decades in the spotlight, Keanu still carried an aura that made people take notice. The dressing room was simple but comfortable: a couch, a makeup table, snacks, and drinks set out on a small table. Keanu declined the offer of the makeup artist, saying he preferred to keep things natural but accepted a bottle of water. "Is there anything special you need before the show?" the coordinator asked. Keanu thought for a moment. "Would it be possible to speak with Trevor briefly before we go on?" "Nothing major, just a quick hello." "Of course." He actually asked the same thing. "I'll arrange it." Left alone in the dressing room, Keanu took out the folder of notes he'd brought with him. He didn't intend to reference them during the interview. That would defeat the purpose of an authentic conversation. But reviewing them helped center his thoughts. One page contained a quote he had written down years ago that had become something of a personal mantra. "The hardest thing in this world is to live in it. It had resonated with him during his darkest times, a reminder that simply continuing forward took courage. A gentle knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. "Mr. Reeves? Trevor has a few minutes now if you'd like to meet him." Keanu was led to a small meeting room where Trevor Noah was waiting. The host stood as Keanu entered, extending his hand with a warm smile. "It's an honor to meet you," Trevor said. "I've been a fan of your work for years." "Likewise," Keanu replied, his handshake firm. "I appreciate you making time for this unconventional request." The two men sat down, the pre-show chaos of the studio continuing outside the door. "I have to admit," Trevor said, "I'm curious about why you wanted to come on the show. Not that we're not thrilled to have you, of course." Keanu took a moment before answering. "I've been thinking a lot lately about connection. Real human connection. Most interviews are so structured, so focused on promoting something. I guess I wanted to try something different, a real conversation." Trevor nodded thoughtfully. "I completely understand that, and I want you to know, there's no pressure. We can talk about whatever feels right in the moment." "I appreciate that," Keanu said. "There are some things I've been wanting to share for a while, not as Keanu Reeves the actor, but just as a person who's lived a bit of life." Their conversation was interrupted by a production assistant letting them know the show would begin in 20 minutes. As they stood to leave, Trevor had one last question. "Is there anything specific you want to make sure we cover? Or anything you definitely don't want to talk about?" Keanu considered this. "I'm open to wherever the conversation goes. Just real. Let's keep it real." As Keanu returned to his dressing room, the energy in the studio continued to build. The audience, now fully seated, buzzed with excitement after being told that Keanu Reeves would be the main guest. Backstage, the production team made final adjustments to the lighting and sound levels. Tom checked in with the camera operators, making sure they were prepared to capture what might be a more nuanced conversation than their usual celebrity interviews. In his dressing room, Keanu stood before the mirror, not checking his appearance, but taking a moment to center himself. He had faced cameras countless times throughout his career, but rarely with the intention of revealing parts of himself he usually kept private. A voice came through the speaker in his room. 15 minutes. To showtime, everyone. 15 minutes. Keanu took a deep breath. For better or worse, he had made his decision. Today he would step out from behind the characters he played and speak as himself, about life, loss, joy, and the unexpected wisdom found in the journey, through it all. In the control room, the director turned to Tom. "Do you think this interview will be as different as everyone's expecting?" Tom watched the monitors as the audience settled in and the band played the show's opening theme. "I honestly don't know," he replied, "but I have a feeling we're about to witness something special." 5 minutes to air, everyone. The floor. Director's voice carried across the studio as the audience settled into their seats, the excited murmur growing louder as the show's start approached. Behind the scenes, Trevor stood just off stage, reviewing his notes one last time. He rarely felt nervous before interviews anymore. After years of hosting, it had become second nature. But tonight felt different. Something about Keanu's quiet intensity during their brief meeting had sparked his curiosity in a way few guests did. In the green room, Keanu sat alone, having asked Kelly to give him a few minutes of solitude before the show. He wasn't rehearsing answers or practicing smiles. Instead, he was simply breathing, centering himself in the present moment, a meditation technique he had relied on for decades. A gentle knock on the door broke his concentration. 2 minutes, Mr. Reeves, a production assistant called. "Thank you," he replied, standing and straightening his jacket. As he stepped into the hallway, he noticed several crew members watching him with barely concealed excitement. He offered them a kind smile and a nod as he followed the assistant toward the stage. The studio lights dimmed as the house band played the show's opening theme. The audience's applause swelled as Trevor bounded onto the stage, his energy immediately filling the room. "Welcome to The Daily Show." Trevor greeted the audience, his smile bright under the studio lights. "We have an incredible show for you tonight. I'm particularly excited about our guest, someone who rarely does talk shows and who I'm told has specifically requested to have a real conversation tonight." The audience's interest was piqued, whispers spreading through the crowd. "Please welcome a man who needs no introduction, though I just gave him one anyway, Keanu Reeves." The audience erupted into cheers and stood as Keanu walked onto the stage. The applause was thunderous, continuing far longer than usual for talk show guests. Keanu seemed almost embarrassed by the reception, giving a small wave and a humble nod as he made his way to the chair beside Trevor's desk. As the audience finally settled down, Trevor turned to his guest. "Keanu, thank you so much for being here. I have to say, we were all a bit surprised when your team reached out to us." Keanu smiled, his posture relaxed but attentive. "Thanks for having me, Trevor. Yeah, I don't do this often." "That's quite an understatement," Trevor laughed. "You're famously private, so I have to ask, why now? Why this show?" Keanu took a moment before answering, something unusual in the rapid-fire world of talk shows where silence was considered dead air. "I've been watching your interviews for a while now," he finally said. "You have a way of getting to something real with people, beyond the promotional talking points. And lately, I've been thinking a lot about—" He paused, searching for the right words. Authentic human connection in a world that often feels increasingly disconnected. Trevor nodded, immediately recognizing that this wasn't going to be the typical celebrity interview filled with amusing anecdotes and movie plugs. "Well, that's quite a compliment coming from you," Trevor replied. "And I'm intrigued by what you just said about disconnection. Can you elaborate on that?" Keanu shifted slightly in his chair. "Sure. I've been in this industry for almost 40 years now, and I've watched how our relationship with media and celebrity has changed. Everything's become so curated, so polished. Social media has made everyone their own PR firm in a way." He gave a small laugh. "Not me, obviously. I'm still living in the Stone Age when it comes to that stuff." The audience chuckled at this acknowledgement of his famous avoidance of social media. "But there's something lost in all that curation," Keanu continued. "Something human. And I've been wondering lately if maybe that's part of why people feel so alone, even when they're more connected than ever." Trevor leaned forward, genuinely interested. "That's a fascinating observation. Do you think that's why we're seeing this surge of interest in authenticity? People seem hungry for anything that feels real." "Maybe," Keanu nodded. "But then the irony is that authenticity itself becomes a performance, right? Another brand to sell." The conversation flowed naturally for the next 15 minutes, touching on changes in Hollywood, the evolution of fan culture, and Keanu's perspective on his unusual status as an internet icon, something he claimed to find both touching and slightly bewildering. The audience laughed at his self-deprecating humor and occasional philosophical tangents that Trevor playfully called very Keanu moments. In the control room, Tom watched the monitors with growing appreciation. "This is good," he said to the director. "Different from what we usually do, but the audience is totally with them." "Should we cut to commercial soon?" the director asked. "We're almost at the 20-minute mark." Tom hesitated, watching as the conversation on stage continued to build momentum. "Let's give them a few more minutes. Trevor will signal if he wants to break." On stage, Trevor shifted the conversation slightly. "You know, Keanu, in preparing for this interview, I noticed something interesting. You've been in the spotlight for decades, achieved enormous success, but you've managed to maintain a reputation for being genuinely kind, humble, and grounded. That's rare in this industry. What's your secret?" The question seemed to catch Keanu off guard. He looked down for a moment, then back up at Trevor. "I don't know if there's a secret," he said quietly, "but I've experienced tremendous loss in my life, as many people have, and I think loss has a way of clarifying things, stripping away what doesn't matter." A hush fell over the studio. Even the crew members backstage stopped what they were doing, sensing that something significant was happening. Trevor nodded encouragingly, but remained silent, giving Keanu space to continue if he wanted to. You know, people sometimes ask me why I keep acting after all these years, Keanu said, his voice thoughtful. And the honest answer is that I love it, I do. But there was a time in my life when work was also a lifeline, a way to keep moving forward when standing still felt impossible. The audience was completely silent now, hanging on every word. This was not the carefully crafted celebrity narrative they were used to hearing. I think about success a lot, Keanu continued. What it means, what it's worth. I've been fortunate in my career, but the older I get, the more I realize that what matters, what really matters, isn't the fame or the money or even the work itself. It's how we treat each other. It's the connections we make, the love we give. Trevor, normally quick with a response, found himself momentarily speechless. In the control room, the director looked at Tom questioningly. "Don't you dare cut to commercial," Tom whispered, transfixed by the monitor. "There's something I've never really talked about publicly," Keanu said, his voice dropping slightly. "About 20 years ago, I started a private foundation. No name. Attached to it, no publicity. It funds children's hospitals and cancer research." A few gasps could be heard from the audience. "I don't share this to get credit," Keanu added quickly. "That's actually why I've never talked about it before. But I mention it now because it's connected to what we were discussing about authenticity and purpose." Trevor leaned forward. "May I ask what inspired this foundation?" Keanu took a deep breath. The studio was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning humming in the background. "In 1999, my girlfriend Jennifer Syme and I were expecting a baby," he said softly. "Our daughter was stillborn at 8 months. We named her Ava." He paused, gathering himself. "Jennifer and I broke up shortly after, overcome by grief. And then, in 2001, Jennifer died in a car accident." Several people in the audience had tears in their eyes now. Trevor reached out and briefly touched Keanu's arm in a gesture of support. "I'm so sorry," Trevor said sincerely. Keanu nodded in acknowledgement. "Thank you. It was devastating. But I share this now because out of that experience came this realization that we're all carrying something. Every person you pass on the street, every fan asking for an autograph, every interviewer, every colleague, everyone is navigating their own joy and grief, and knowing that changed how I move through the world." In the control room, Tom noticed that even the typically stoic camera operators seemed moved. One was discreetly wiping her eyes while maintaining her focus on her work. "The foundation became a way to channel grief into something meaningful," Keanu explained. "Not to get over it, you never get over that kind of loss, but to make sure that something good could grow from such darkness." Trevor, clearly touched, took a moment before responding. "Thank you for sharing that with us. I know it can't be easy to talk about." Keanu gave a small, sad smile. "It isn't. But that's part of why I wanted to come here today. We live in a culture that often values projection over authenticity, and I've been complicit in that in my own way. Playing characters, keeping my private life private, which I still believe in, by the way." "Of course," Trevor nodded. "But I also believe there's value in sharing our true experiences with each other, our struggles as well as our successes, because that's how we remind each other that we're not alone." The director signaled to Trevor that they needed to break for commercial soon. Trevor nodded subtly in acknowledgement before turning back to Keanu. "We need to take a quick break, but I want to continue this conversation. Will you stay with us?" "Absolutely," Keanu replied. As the show cut to commercial, the audience burst into applause. Some were wiping away tears, others leaning toward companions to whisper their reactions. No one reached for their phones to check messages or social media, a rarity in any live audience these days. Backstage, Kelly watched on a monitor, smiling softly. This was the Keanu she knew, thoughtful, deeply feeling, genuine. The man behind the movie star that so few people ever got to see. In the control room, Tom turned to his team. "When we come back from break, clear the schedule. Cancel the next segment. Give them as much time as they need." No one objected. They all understood they were witnessing something extraordinary, a moment of genuine human connection in an industry built on illusion. The studio lights brightened as the show returned from commercial break. The audience, still processing Keanu's heartfelt revelations, welcomed the return with warm applause rather than the usual enthusiastic cheering. Something had shifted in the room. A deeper, more intimate atmosphere had taken hold. Trevor turned to Keanu with newfound respect in his eyes. "Welcome back. We're here with Keanu Reeves having what I can only describe as one of the most genuine conversations I've experienced on this show." He paused briefly. "Before the break, you shared something incredibly personal about loss and how it shaped your perspective. Thank you for trusting us with that." Keanu nodded, a subtle appreciation in his expression. "Thank you for creating a space where it felt right to share." "I'd like to go deeper into something you mentioned," Trevor continued. "You talked about your foundation and the work it does. Could you tell us more about the projects you're supporting?" Keanu shifted slightly in his chair, clearly more comfortable discussing the work than his personal motivations behind it. "The foundation focuses primarily on pediatric cancer research and supporting children's hospitals. We fund innovative treatment approaches that might not get traditional backing, and we help families navigate the financial burden that comes with long-term illness." "That's remarkable work," Trevor said. "And you've kept this private for 2 decades?" "It felt right that way," Keanu replied simply. "The work isn't about me." Trevor leaned forward. "But here's what fascinates me. In a culture obsessed with broadcasting every good deed for likes and follows, you chose silence. In fact, your entire approach to fame seems to run counter to what we've come to expect from celebrities." A small smile crossed Keanu's face. "I'm not sure I deserve any special credit for that. It just never made sense to me to perform goodness, if that makes sense. Real compassion happens in private moments." In the control room, Tom watched the monitors intently. "This is gold," he whispered to his assistant. "Not in a ratings way, though we're definitely getting those too, but in a human way." On stage, Trevor steered the conversation in a new direction. "You've been in this industry through massive changes, from analog to digital, from theatrical releases to streaming. How has your approach to your craft evolved through all that?" Keanu considered the question thoughtfully. "The fundamentals haven't changed. Acting is still about truth, about finding the humanity in a character. But what has changed is the world around us, and that affects the stories we tell and how we tell them." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "There's something I've been thinking about a lot lately, particularly as technology advances so rapidly. We're creating these incredible tools, AI, virtual reality, immersive experiences. But what are we using them for? Are they bringing us closer together or pushing us further apart?" Trevor nodded encouragingly. "That's a profound question. I had this experience recently," Keanu continued, his voice taking on an animated quality that had been absent earlier. "I was in Japan for a project, and I visited this small town that had been devastated by a tsunami years ago. They've rebuilt, but the community was forever changed. I met this older man who had lost his home, his business, everything material. But he told me something I can't stop thinking about." The studio was completely silent, everyone hanging on his words. He said, "The wave took our things, but it gave us back our humanity." He explained that before the disaster, everyone was busy, disconnected, living separate lives. But afterward, they had to rely on each other. They rebuilt not just buildings, but relationships. Keanu leaned forward, his passion evident. "That's when it hit me. Maybe true wealth isn't what we own, but the connections we forge, the love we give and receive, the impact we have on each other's lives." Trevor was visibly moved. That's actually profound. "And it made me think about my position in this industry," Keanu continued. "I've been fortunate enough to have success, to have resources. And I started asking myself, what am I doing with that good fortune? How am I using my position to strengthen human connection, rather than just entertain?" Which led to something you haven't spoken about publicly before, Trevor prompted gently. Keanu took a deep breath. "Yes. About 5 years ago, I started a second foundation, completely separate from the one I mentioned earlier. This one works specifically in conflict zones around the world. Murmurs of surprise rippled through the audience. We identify schools in areas affected by war or extreme poverty, and we fund not just rebuilding efforts but ongoing educational programs. We've established over 30 schools now, across 12 countries. The key is that we work with local communities. They determine what they need. We just provide resources and support. Trevor's expression showed genuine astonishment. I had no idea. I don't think anyone did. That was intentional, Keanu said. The regions we work in are politically complex. Having a Hollywood name attached could complicate things or make the schools targets. So we operate through partnerships with local organizations. No publicity, no naming rights, no conditions, just support for education. May I ask what inspired this particular focus? Trevor asked. Keanu's gaze grew distant for a moment. I traveled a lot for films, and I kept seeing the same thing in different parts of the world. Children with incredible potential, but limited opportunities because of circumstances they didn't create. War, poverty, displacement. And I remembered something my mother taught me when I was young, that education isn't just about facts and figures, it's about possibility, about showing a child that they have options, that their life can be different than what they see around them. He continued, his voice growing more passionate. There was this one school in particular in a region I won't name for security reasons. The building had been partially destroyed in a bombing. The children were still coming to class, sitting on broken concrete, sharing the few books that hadn't been destroyed. Their teacher, this incredible woman, was using charcoal to write on a piece of wall that was still standing. Keanu shook his head, still moved by the memory. I visited incognito, just as part of a humanitarian assessment team. This teacher had no idea who I was, which was perfect. She showed me the students' work, told me about their dreams. One girl wanted to be a doctor. A boy wanted to be an engineer to rebuild his city. And I realized these kids weren't seeing themselves as victims. They were seeing futures, possibilities, despite everything they'd endured. That must have been powerful to witness, Trevor said softly. It changed me, Keanu admitted. I flew home and immediately set up the foundation. We rebuilt that school first with reinforced materials, a proper library, computers, science equipment. But more importantly, we established a scholarship fund for the students to continue their education beyond what was available locally. In the audience, several people were openly crying now. A production assistant handed tissues to those nearest the stage. The first girl from that school just graduated medical school last year, Keanu said, a rare full smile lighting up his face. She's now working in her community, providing care in an area that had no doctor for nearly a decade. Trevor seemed momentarily at a loss for words. When he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. I think what strikes me most is not just the work itself, which is extraordinary, but the fact that you've done all this without seeking any recognition. In a world where every celebrity charity effort comes with press releases and photo ops, you chose a different path. Keanu looked slightly uncomfortable with the praise. I'm not sharing this to get credit now. I'm sharing it because I think there's something important in the approach, something that gets lost in our culture of constant performance and validation. What's that? Trevor asked. That real change happens quietly. That love expressed through action is more powerful than any statement or social media post. That we don't need an audience to do what matters. Keanu paused, then added, and that anyone can do this in their own way. You don't need millions of dollars. You just need to see the humanity in others and respond to it. In the control room, the director whispered to Tom, we should be wrapping up soon for the final segment. Tom shook his head firmly. No. Let this continue. We'll cut something else if we need to. On stage, Trevor seemed to make the same decision, ignoring the teleprompter that was suggesting a transition to the next topic. You mentioned seeing humanity in others, Trevor said. In your years of fame, has it been difficult to feel seen as a person rather than as a celebrity or character? The question seemed to strike a chord with Keanu. He was quiet for a moment before answering. Yes, he admitted simply. Fame creates this strange one-way mirror. People feel they know you because they've seen your work. But what they know is a projection, not the person. He gave a small, self-deprecating laugh. Though in my case, some of the characters I've played aren't that far from who I am. The audience chuckled appreciatively, the emotional tension in the room easing slightly. But there's a loneliness in being seen, but not known, Keanu continued. I think that's universal, though, not just for people in the public eye. We all wonder sometimes if anyone truly sees us, understands us, if we're connected or just adjacent to each other. Trevor nodded thoughtfully. That's a profound observation about the human condition. I'm still figuring it all out, Keanu said with humble sincerity. Still learning how to be present, how to connect authentically, how to use whatever influence I have for something meaningful. A sudden, spontaneous applause broke out in the audience. Not the polite applause of a talk show audience following cues, but the genuine response of people deeply moved by what they were witnessing. As the applause continued, Trevor and Keanu exchanged a look of shared understanding. Something extraordinary had happened in this conversation. A rare moment of genuine human connection in the most unlikely of places. A television studio under bright lights, in front of cameras and an audience. In the control room, Tom looked at his team, all of whom were watching the monitors with rapt attention. I've been producing talk shows for 15 years, he said quietly. I've never seen anything like this. As the applause finally subsided, Trevor spoke again, his tone different now. Less the polished host and more simply a person engaged in meaningful conversation. I think what you've shared tonight will resonate with a lot of people, he said. In a world that often feels increasingly divided and superficial, you've reminded us of what truly matters. Keanu nodded, a quiet acknowledgement of the moment they'd created together. Host and guest, speaker and listener. Two humans finding common ground in the shared experience of being alive in a complex world. By the time The Daily Show ended that Thursday evening, something remarkable had happened. As the studio lights dimmed and the audience filed out, there was none of the usual chatter about funny moments or celebrity gossip. Instead, people spoke in hushed tones, many wiping away tears, others deep in thought. I've been to 5 tapings, and I've never seen anything like that, one audience member said to his friend as they walked toward the exit. It didn't even feel like a TV show. It felt like, I don't know, like we were witnessing something real. His friend nodded. I'm not even sure I want to talk about it yet. I need to process what he said about loss and purpose. Backstage, the energy was similarly transformed. The usual post-show bustle continued, crew members striking the set, producers huddled over notes, but there was a different quality to the movement, a thoughtfulness that wasn't typically present in the rush to wrap up. In his dressing room, Trevor sat quietly, still absorbing the conversation he'd just had. In 15 years of interviewing people, politicians, celebrities, authors, activists, he couldn't remember ever feeling so profoundly moved. A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. Come in, he called. Tom entered, looking as affected as Trevor felt. I just wanted to say, that was extraordinary. Truly. Trevor nodded. It wasn't even an interview, was it? It was a conversation. A real one. The network's already calling. The clips are going to be everywhere by morning, Tom said. But that almost feels, I don't know, wrong somehow. Like we're commercializing something that wasn't meant for that. I know what you mean, Trevor agreed. But maybe that's the point. Maybe what made it special is exactly what people need to see. Genuine human connection in a medium that rarely allows for it. In another room down the hall, Keanu was preparing to leave, Kelly at his side. You okay? She asked, studying his face with the familiarity of an old friend. Keanu nodded slowly. Yeah, it was more than I expected, in a good way. He paused. Do you think I said too much about the foundation? Kelly shook her head. No. You protected the specific details that matter for security. And maybe Maybe it's time for some of that work to inspire others. As Keanu left the studio through a back entrance, avoiding the small crowd of fans who always seemed to find out where celebrities would exit, he felt a strange lightness. For decades, he had maintained careful boundaries between his public persona and his private life, between the characters he played and the person he was. Tonight, those lines had blurred in a way that felt unexpectedly right. By midnight, clips from the interview had begun spreading across social media. The show's official accounts posted a 6-minute segment in which Keanu discussed his education initiative, and within hours, it had been viewed over 1 million times. Comments poured in from around the world. I've always liked Keanu as an actor, but wow, I had no idea he was doing this kind of work. The way he talks about seeing humanity in war zones, I'm in tears. This is what using celebrity privilege actually looks like. No photo ops, no press releases, just quietly changing lives for decades. By Friday morning, the conversation had spread beyond entertainment news into mainstream media. Morning shows played clips. Commentators analyzed the cultural significance of a celebrity rejecting the standard playbook of public charity, and hashtags related to Keanu's philosophy on quiet giving trended globally. In his apartment, Trevor woke to dozens of messages from friends, colleagues, and industry contacts. Even his mother had texted from South Africa. That interview was something special, reminded me why storytelling matters. Trevor scrolled through the reactions online, feeling a mix of pride and protectiveness. What had happened in that studio was genuine, and he hoped the inevitable media cycle wouldn't diminish its impact. His phone rang. It was Rachel, the head writer. "Have you seen what's happening?" she asked without preamble. The reaction to the interview? "Yeah, it's pretty overwhelming," Trevor replied. "Not just that," Rachel said. "Check your email. People are responding in ways I've never seen before." Trevor opened his laptop and found an email from Tom with the subject line, "Something remarkable is happening." The email contained links to dozens of social media posts, not just reactions to the interview, but stories of people taking action, inspired by Keanu's words. A group of college students had started an impromptu fundraiser for their local children's hospital. A tech executive announced he would anonymously fund education for 50 students in underserved communities. A teacher in Oklahoma wrote about how she had shown the interview to her high school class, leading to a discussion about purpose and giving that had moved her to tears. "It's not just talk," Rachel said over the phone. "People are actually doing things. It's like a ripple effect." Meanwhile, in a small hotel room across town, Keanu was also witnessing the response. Unlike Trevor, he wasn't on social media, but Kelly had been monitoring the reaction and providing updates. The Foundation's general email has received over 300 messages since last night, she told him over breakfast. People wanting to contribute, to volunteer, to help in some way. Keanu looked up from his tea, surprised. "That wasn't my intention, I know," Kelly said with a gentle smile. "That's probably why it's happening. People can recognize authenticity when they see it." Throughout the weekend, the conversation continued to evolve. What had started as buzz about a celebrity interview had transformed into something more meaningful, a widespread discussion about purpose, connection, and quiet compassion in a noisy world. On Sunday morning, Trevor received a text from an unlisted number. "Thank you for the space to have a real conversation. It meant more than I can say." Trevor smiled, typing back, "Thank you for reminding us all what matters." By Monday morning, when the Daily Show production team gathered for their weekly meeting, the impact of Thursday's interview was still unfolding. Unexpected invitations had come in from educational organizations, humanitarian groups, and even other talk show hosts who wanted Trevor to discuss the interview and its impact. "We should do a follow-up segment," one of the writers suggested, "about the response and what it says about what people are hungry for right now." Tom shook his head. "I think we let this one stand on its own. We don't need to comment on it or analyze it. It speaks for itself." Trevor nodded in agreement. "But I do think there's something we can learn from it. about the kind of show we want to create moving forward. The meeting shifted to a deeper conversation about the purpose of their platform. If a single authentic conversation could spark such meaningful response, what responsibility did they have to create more such moments? How could they balance entertainment with substance, laughter with depth? As they talked, Trevor found himself remembering something Keanu had said off camera after the show had ended. They had been saying goodbye backstage when Keanu had paused and said, "You know, I think maybe we're all just looking for permission to be real with each other. To drop the performance for a while." Those words had stayed with Trevor, and now they shaped his vision for the show's future. In the weeks that followed, subtle changes began to appear in the Daily Show format. While it remained primarily a comedy show, Trevor began incorporating more substantive conversations, creating space for guests to move beyond promotional talking points if they chose to. The audience responded enthusiastically, and other talk shows began to take notice. 6 weeks after the interview, Trevor received a package at the studio. Inside was a handwritten note and a small, smooth stone. The note read, "I found this on a beach in Japan, near the town I mentioned in our conversation. The locals believe that stones polished by the ocean carry the stories of everyone who has held them. I thought you might appreciate adding your story to its journey. With gratitude for our conversation, Kay." Trevor turned the stone over in his hand, feeling its weight and smoothness, a simple object transformed by time and elements into something unique. It struck him as an apt metaphor for what had happened that night on his show, an ordinary interview, transformed by authenticity and courage into something extraordinary. He placed the stone on his desk, where it would remain, a reminder of the power of genuine human connection in a world that too often settled for less. Meanwhile, across the country, Keanu had returned to work on a new film project. His daily routine hadn't changed dramatically. He still arrived early to set, treated every crew member with the same respect he showed his co-stars, and maintained his characteristic humility. But something had shifted, subtly, but significantly. The carefully maintained wall between his public and private selves had developed a deliberate opening, not a breach, but a doorway through which authentic connection could flow in both directions. He had spent decades being known without being seen. Now, having chosen to share some of his truth, he found himself experiencing a different kind of recognition in the eyes of those he met. Not the distant admiration of celebrity, but the warmer acknowledgement of shared humanity. In studios and boardrooms across the entertainment industry, conversations were happening about the Keanu effect, as some had begun to call it. Publicists debated whether authenticity could be manufactured. Network executives wondered if vulnerability could be replicated for ratings, and celebrities watched with interest as the public responded to a different kind of star presence. But the most significant impacts weren't happening in Hollywood at all. They were taking place in classrooms where teachers discussed the meaning of success, in family dinner conversations about purpose, in quiet decisions to give without recognition, to connect without performance, to see the humanity in others without expectation. The ripples continued to spread, touching lives far beyond the reach of a single television broadcast, a testament to the enduring power of truth simply spoken and genuinely heard.